Helena was always 2 steps ahead of the law, the ultimate escape artist who seemed to slip through the cracks of every trap set for her. Her reputation was legendary, whispered about in the dark corners of police stations and criminal circles alike. No one knew her true name, only the string of robberies and scams that followed her like a shadow. Her last heist? Nothing short of brilliant. She had swiped a rare diamond from under the noses of the city's finest officers, leaving only a trail of confusion and frustration in her wake. But as always, there was a price to pay for her freedom. The constant tension of never being able to rest, of always looking over her shoulder, was starting to weigh on her. Each day was a game of cat and mouse, with no end in sight. Even as she basked in the adrenaline of her success, Helena couldn't help but feel the gnawing ache of loneliness. She didn't have friends, only fleeting acquaintances, and her heart was buried under layers of self-preservation. Every person she crossed, every moment of intimacy was fleeting. She trusted no one, not even herself. Yet, despite the chaos she orchestrated in the world around her, there was a method to her madness. She had to stay 1 step ahead, or everything she had worked for would come crashing down. But tonight, as she looked at the stolen diamond resting in her palm, Helena couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. It wasn't the usual excitement that filled her chest after a successful job. No, it was something darker, something more profound. She could sense it in the air, the way the streets seemed to hum with tension, as if everyone was waiting for her to slip up. There was a figure watching from the shadows, someone who wasn't about to let her get away this time. But who, and what did they want? The night was just beginning, and Helena had no idea what kind of trap was about to close in on her. Helena's instincts were sharp, but even she couldn't always predict the ways the world would turn against her. As she made her way through the winding alleys of the city, the adrenaline buzz began to fade, replaced by a creeping unease. Her hand gripped the diamond tightly, a small comfort in a world where trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. She turned a corner, her eyes scanning every face that passed her. She had made it this far, but how long could she keep running? The feeling of being hunted was something she knew well, but tonight, it was different. There was a man in the crowd, one who didn't look like the others. His gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. Detective James, a man with a past as complicated as her own, had been tracking her for months. He was methodical, patient, and relentless, everything she admired in an opponent. But what made him more dangerous than the others was his obsession. James wasn't just trying to catch her, he was consumed by the idea of taking her down. Helena had outsmarted him more times than she could count, and each time, the frustration in his eyes deepened. But tonight, she had no way of knowing that this time, it would be different. He was getting closer, and Helena could feel it. She stopped in her tracks, her pulse quickening. She couldn't see him, but she could feel his presence like a weight pressing down on her chest. Was it him, or was it her mind playing tricks? The question lingered in the air, unanswered, as she walked faster. The city seemed darker tonight, the shadows longer, as if the streets themselves were closing in around her. She needed to disappear. She needed to get lost in the chaos before anyone could catch her. But James wasn't just another cop. He knew how to play the game, and he wasn't about to let her slip away so easily this time. Helena couldn't shake the feeling that tonight, the game was changing. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to escape, to vanish into the city's underbelly and never look back. But something held her in place, something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of inevitability. She had always been 1 step ahead, but now, that sense of control was slipping away. It was as if the universe itself was conspiring to catch her, pulling the strings of fate in ways she couldn't predict. The constant thrill of escaping had turned into a burden, and for the first time, Helena wondered if it was all worth it. She made her way to a nondescript building, the one she called home for now, her mind racing with thoughts of the past. How did she get here? From a troubled childhood to a life of crime, each choice had brought her to this point. She had stolen, lied, and manipulated her way through life, always with the escape artist's grace and precision. But those skills, honed over years, were no longer enough. There was someone who knew her too well, someone who was going to force her to confront her choices. Detective James. Inside her apartment, Helena closed the door and leaned against it, her breathing heavy. She stared at the diamond again, its brilliance mocking her. She had outwitted the system before, but she was starting to doubt her ability to do so again. The past always caught up with her, sooner or later. And James, with his quiet obsession, was a shadow she could no longer outrun. The question now was simple. Could she escape him once more? Or had the hunter finally become the hunted? The night was alive with the usual hum of the city, the flicker of neon signs casting their glow across crowded streets. Helena wasn't used to slowing down. But tonight, something was different. She was on the prowl. But there was a shift in her usual routine. She was drawn to a bar she'd never been to before, a dive tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. Maybe it was the lure of anonymity, or perhaps she just wanted to forget for a while. As she stepped inside, the warmth and dim lighting wrapped around her like a soft blanket, offering a brief respite from the tension outside. She didn't expect much, just another night to unwind. But then she saw him, James. He was leaning against the bar, alone, his sharp features partially obscured by the low light. At first, Helena didn't recognize him, but something in the way he carried himself made her pause. His calm demeanor, the slight smile on his lips, it was a contrast to the hardened edge she had come to expect from men. He was different. But what struck her the most was how he seemed completely unaware of who she was, a rarity in Helena's world. She could read people easily, but this one, he was a mystery she wanted to crack. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. It wasn't the kind of connection she usually had with people. She wasn't here to make friends, and certainly not to get involved. Yet, there was something about the way he held her gaze, something that piqued her curiosity. Despite herself, Helena found herself walking toward him, the pull of something she couldn't name guiding her steps. Helena slid onto the bar stool next to him, the subtle scent of his cologne lingering in the air between them. She kept her posture casual, but her mind was anything but. She had lived in the shadows for so long that any form of connection felt like a potential threat. But this man, James, he didn't make her feel cornered. Instead, there was something oddly comforting about his presence. An unspoken promise that she could let her guard down just a little. She ordered a drink, trying to focus on the warmth of the glass in her hand, but his voice cut through the haze of her thoughts. "You look like you've got a story," he said, his tone smooth but not probing. It was almost as if he knew better than to ask too many questions. His eyes were warm, friendly even, but they also held something deeper, something that made Helena's gut twist in a way she couldn't explain. Despite the constant wariness in her heart, Helena chuckled, the sound foreign to her own ears. "I'm sure everyone in here has a story, but not all of them are worth telling." James raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Maybe the best stories are the ones that don't get told." His smile was easy, but it didn't quite reach his eyes, as though he was carefully measuring her every reaction. Still, something about the way he leaned toward her, the subtle invitation to talk without pushing her, drew her in. She found herself sharing more than she intended to, her words flowing with a casual ease she hadn't experienced in ages. But beneath the conversation, there was always something else, something simmering just beneath the surface. Helena couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just talking to some random guy at a bar. James wasn't who he seemed, and she was starting to realize that her instincts might be telling her the truth. He was a man with an agenda, but what was it? As the night wore on, the connection between Helena and James deepened, albeit subtly. They spoke of everything and nothing, small talk, the kind that masks the weight of unspoken truths. Helena caught herself smiling, a rare sight these days, and she found herself enjoying the conversation more than she wanted to admit. For once, she let herself feel something other than the constant pressure of survival, the warmth of the bar, the gentle hum of conversation around them. It was all so ordinary, so safe, but nothing in her life was ever truly safe. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a nagging voice reminded her that nothing was as simple as it seemed. James kept his composure, never pushing too hard, yet always staying just close enough. She could see the intrigue in his eyes, the quiet fascination with the woman sitting next to him. But there was something else, something that didn't match his charming smile. It was the way his questions came a little too easily, the way he could read her body language like a book. Helena was no amateur when it came to deception, and something told her that James wasn't either. As the night drew to a close, the air between them shifted. Helena didn't want to feel vulnerable, didn't want to think that this man, this stranger, could be someone who might really see her. She stood up, ready to walk away, but James's voice stopped her in her tracks. "We could do this again sometime if you're interested," he said, his words hanging in the air between them like an unspoken promise. Helena paused, her heart pounding slightly faster than usual. She should say no. walk away and never look back. But instead, she found herself nodding, just a little. Maybe, she replied, her voice soft, betraying the wall she usually kept up. And with that, she left, the night air feeling colder than before, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Helena tried to dismiss the unease that lingered after her night with James. She wasn't in the habit of letting people get under her skin, but something about him was different. She'd spent days replaying their conversation in her mind, analyzing every word, every glance. At first, it seemed like just another fleeting connection, nothing more than a temporary distraction. But as the days went by, his presence began to gnaw at her, much like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. His easy charm, the way he seemed to understand her without even trying. Helena hated how much he had gotten under her skin. It wasn't long before she started noticing the inconsistencies in his behavior, little things that didn't add up. His questions, which had seemed harmless at first, started to feel pointed. He was too interested in her past, too curious about her life on the run. And when they spoke, there was always that faint air of professionalism, a reminder that he wasn't just any man, but someone with a deeper agenda. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that he had been playing her all along. Helena had been fooled before, but this time she wouldn't let her guard down so easily. A few days later, when James reached out again, it didn't feel like an innocent invitation. It felt like a lure. He suggested they meet again, this time in a more secluded part of town, far away from the bustling streets and busy nightlife. Something in his voice told her it wasn't just about a drink anymore. But why? Was he planning to finally make his move? To close the net around her? The thought made her blood run cold. She wasn't sure what he had planned. But one thing was certain. James was playing a dangerous game. And this time, it wasn't just about charm or seduction. It was about control. And for the first time in a long while, Helena wasn't sure if she was ready for it. The night of their meeting, Helena couldn't shake the gnawing sense of being led into a trap. Every instinct she had screamed for her to turn back, to disappear into the shadows where she could remain untouchable. But curiosity, and something else, drove her forward. She found herself standing at the designated location, a dimly lit cafe tucked in a corner alley, far removed from the vibrant streets she knew so well. It felt like an odd place to meet someone, especially someone who had been following her every move. But then again, perhaps that was the point. It wasn't just about the location, it was the tension that hung in the air, thick with unspoken intentions. James was already there, seated at a small table by the window. He didn't look like a man with a hidden agenda, just a man enjoying the calm of the evening, his usual easy smile in place. He waved her over, and for a moment, she almost forgot. She almost allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to be normal, to be someone other than the criminal on the run. She approached, trying to steady her breath, but every step felt like she was walking deeper into enemy territory. Their conversation was light, almost too light, as if he were trying to lull her into a sense of comfort. But Helena's mind wasn't on the words. They were nothing more than a backdrop to the storm brewing inside her. It was in the way his gaze lingered on her, the way he subtly steered the conversation to topics he'd asked her about before. He was fishing, probing deeper into her past, making it clear that he knew more than he let on. And as he spoke, she could feel the trap tightening, the invisible noose slowly pulling around her neck. This wasn't a date. This was a calculated move. And James? He wasn't here to play nice. Helena's instincts screamed at her to leave, but she held her ground. She could feel the walls closing in, but she wasn't the type to back down, not without a fight. James wasn't fooling her. The easy smile, the soft voice, they were all part of the performance. As their conversation continued, she could see the cracks in his facade. Every so often, his calm demeanor slipped, just for a second, his eyes darting to the door, his posture rigid. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The pieces were starting to fall into place. He wasn't here to get to know her. He was here to watch her, to trap her. And then it happened. Just as she began to edge toward the door, her hand brushing the cold metal of the handle, James casually mentioned something that made her blood run cold. "You know, I heard about that last job you pulled, the one that went south. A real messy situation, wasn't it?" His voice was low, almost casual, but the words hit her like a slap. He knew. He knew about the heist. He knew about everything. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. In that moment, It wasn't just his words that rattled her. It was the realization that she had underestimated him. James wasn't just after her freedom. He was after her downfall. Helena stood still for a moment, weighing her options. The truth was, there was nowhere to run. James had set his trap with precision, knowing exactly how to bait her. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the calculated pressure of his presence, and as the silence between them stretched, she realized she was at a crossroads. The next few seconds could change everything. Could she still escape him? Or had she already walked straight into the trap? The weight of the moment hung over Helena like a storm cloud, dark and oppressive. She could feel the tension coiling in her chest, a sharp contrast to the quiet that surrounded them. James hadn't moved. His expression, once so charming, now seemed almost predatory. It was as if he knew something she didn't, as if he was watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. His words had cut through her like a blade, and now, every move she made felt calculated. The game had changed. She wasn't just trying to outrun the law anymore. She was being cornered, slowly but surely, by the one person who might just know her better than she knew herself. Helena's mind raced, flashing back to the years she had spent on the run, the moments when escape seemed impossible, and yet, she always found a way. She had survived by staying one step ahead, by trusting no one and nothing, including herself. But now, James was the one person she couldn't read, couldn't predict. She had underestimated him, and now, as his gaze bore into her, she had to admit the truth. She had made a fatal mistake. He had lured her in, played on her weakness, and now he was waiting for her to fall into his trap. She could feel the walls closing in, the knowledge that she was on the brink of losing everything. Escape was no longer an option. Not without a fight. The stakes were higher than they had ever been before. James had taken something from her, something that could never be replaced, her sense of control, and that, more than anything, was what Helena couldn't let go of. She had spent her entire life running, but now she faced a decision that would shape the rest of her future. Would she keep running, or would she face the consequences of the life she had built and the choices she had made? Helena's mind churned with the possibilities, each one more daunting than the last. Running had always been her go-to solution. It was simple, clear, but now, something had shifted. She wasn't sure if it was the weight of James's gaze, or the realization that the stakes were too high to keep running. The constant strain of living in the shadows had worn her down, and for the first time in years, she found herself considering the cost of fleeing again. Could she truly outrun him? Could she keep the life she had built by always looking over her shoulder? Or was this the moment she had to stop running, face the consequences, and deal with the damage she had caused? Her thoughts drifted back to the times she had been caught, moments of weakness when she had almost let someone in, almost trusted someone, only to be betrayed. Every failed relationship, every lost connection had reinforced one truth in her mind. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet here she was, staring at James, the man who had somehow slipped under her radar, the man who had known exactly how to get to her. He had manipulated her, and she couldn't help but wonder if that was his plan all along. Was this love, or was it just another clever trap? The emotions inside Helena were a tangled mess. Fear, anger, betrayal, but beneath it all, something colder and more calculating stirred: revenge. She had always seen herself as a survivor, someone who would never let herself be caught in a web of lies. But now, as she looked at James, she felt something shift. If she could no longer run, then she had to make a choice, and that choice wasn't going to be easy. But one thing was certain: she wouldn't let him have the last word. If James thought he had won, he was gravely mistaken. Helena wasn't just a criminal. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she would find a way to regain control. But how? Helena stood there, her pulse quickening with each passing second, the decision weighing heavily on her. She was no stranger to hard choices, but this one felt different. It was more than just about escaping the law. It was about her life, her identity, who she was and who she was willing to become. The flashing images of her past crimes, the faces of people she had betrayed, the moments where she'd walked away from consequences, all of it led her here, to this very crossroads. Could she just slip away into the night once more, leaving the mess behind her? Or was it time to face the damage and make it right? Or at least make sure it didn't define her anymore? Her eyes locked with James's, the man who had hunted her for so long. She could see the expectation in his gaze, the certainty that she would crumble, that she would make the mistake he had been waiting for. But Helena wasn't ready to give him that satisfaction. She had faced worse than him before, much worse, and come out on top. She had survived because of one simple truth: no one controlled her. Not the system, not the law, and certainly not James. The thought of running again, of slipping away like she always did, was tempting, but it wasn't who she was anymore. That part of her, the one who ran, was slowly slipping away, and in its place, something fiercer, more dangerous was rising. James didn't know it yet, but the moment he had cornered her was the moment he had made his mistake. Helena wasn't going to be a victim. Not now. Not ever. As the silence stretched between them, her mind was made up. It wasn't about running, and it wasn't about surrendering. It was about taking control, taking back what was hers. She would face James, face the truth of her actions, but she would do it on her own terms. The trap he had set for her, she would turn it around. Helena had never felt the weight of her choices so heavily, not like this. The moment was upon her, and there was no turning back. The trap was set. James had made his move, and now the tables were turned. She could hear his words echoing in her mind, his voice pleading, trying to convince her to surrender. "It's not too late, Helena," he had said, his tone soft, almost as if he genuinely cared. But it wasn't care. It was manipulation. It was part of the game, part of the plan. He thought she would fall for it. He thought she would give up. But he didn't know her. Not really. This was no longer about running. This was about redemption. Her redemption. Helena had been running her entire life, from one crime to the next, one betrayal to another. She had hurt people. She had betrayed them. And maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be caught. But as she stood there, staring at James, she realized something profound. She wasn't just a criminal. She was a survivor. She had built her life on the edge, always balancing on the thin line between right and wrong. But she wasn't going to let that define her anymore. The time had come to reclaim her power. James was no longer the hunter. In this moment, he was the prey. Helena's sharp instincts kicked in, her mind calculating every possible move, every escape route. She could feel the adrenaline rushing through her veins, the familiar excitement of the game returning. But this time, it was different. This wasn't about escaping. It was about outsmarting him, about showing him that he had underestimated her from the very beginning. She wasn't just going to slip away into the night like a shadow. She was going to take control, and she was going to do it in a way that would leave him speechless, powerless. Helena could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, as she stepped closer to James, her every movement calculated, deliberate. This wasn't just about escape. This was about turning the tables. The police had spent years chasing her, but James, he had come closest. The irony wasn't lost on her. He had been so obsessed with catching her, so sure that he could break her. But the truth was, James had underestimated the one thing that had kept Helena alive all these years: her ability to adapt, to outthink everyone around her. And right now, in this moment, she was thinking faster than she ever had before. She could see the uncertainty flickering in his eyes, the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his gun. But Helena wasn't scared. She was alive, the kind of alive that only came from taking control. She had lived her entire life on the run, but now, she realized that it wasn't freedom she had been chasing all this time. It was power, the power to decide her fate. And for the first time, Helena was going to do just that. She wasn't going to let James or anyone else take that away from her. Without a word, she moved. Quick, fluid, instinctive. And in one swift motion, she disarmed him, twisting the gun from his hand. James's eyes widened in shock, his surprise evident. This wasn't how the game was supposed to go. She had been the one he was meant to catch, the one he would triumph over. But now, it was clear, the power had shifted. James was the one who was vulnerable. His expression faltered, the calm facade cracking as he realized the game was over. But Helena wasn't about to kill him. No, that wasn't her style. She had a different kind of victory in mind. As she pointed the gun at him, a smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. "You thought you had me," she said, her voice cold but filled with satisfaction. "But I've been ahead of you this entire time." James was frozen, caught in the moment of realization. For the first time, the great detective was the one who had been outplayed. The look in his eyes was a mixture of disbelief and frustration, as if he couldn't fathom that after everything, he had been the one who'd been trapped. But Helena wasn't concerned with his emotions. She was focused on something else, something deeper. This was her final moment of freedom, and it wasn't about running or fighting anymore. It was about claiming the life she had always been denied, a life where she wasn't defined by her crimes or by the people chasing her. Helena slowly lowered the gun, her fingers steady despite the chaos of her emotions. She had the power now, not just over James, but over herself. In this moment, she could walk away, leave him behind and disappear once more into the shadows, but that choice didn't sit well with her. For the first time, she realized that the escape she had been searching for all these years wasn't just a physical one, it was an internal one. She had been running from the consequences of her choices, but what if, just for once, she faced them head-on? James's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift in her demeanor. "You can't just walk away from this," he said, his voice hoarse with desperation. But Helena wasn't listening anymore. She had already made her choice. "I don't need to run anymore," she replied, her voice steady. "This is the end of the road. For both of us." As she turned and walked away, the weight of the decision settled on her shoulders. She had outsmarted James, turned his game against him, and in the process, had freed herself from the prison she had built around her own heart. But as the distance between them grew, she knew that her victory was bittersweet. She was free, yes, but the scars of her past would never truly fade. The price of betrayal, of trust broken, would linger with her forever, but that was a price she was willing to pay.